Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. We're coming to you live from CES in Las Vegas, Nevada, and joining me for this segment, we have Pat Reilly. He's the co-founder of Uplinq. We're here to discuss properly assessing risk and expanding financial access for all. It is great to have you with us, Pat. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Wonderful to be here.
And it's interesting because you spent nearly a quarter of a century in traditional financial services. What was the inspiration behind Uplinq?
Sure, I was an executive for some of the largest banks in the US. I headed up North American products for Equifax. I'm an economist. And so that kind of puts me in a unique position where I'm able to look out, and what I was able to identify was just this enormous gap and how banks were really equipped to move capital into the hands of small businesses. And so it's important to understand that small businesses represent 50% of our total employment. And it's sort of the crucible or the incubator for our IP, right? Things like CES probably wouldn't even exist if there wasn't something like thriving small businesses. And so we need to do something about that. We need to serve them better.
Right, well, it's interesting because the World Bank refers to these small businesses as the missing middle, and to your point, they are the backbone of innovation. Why is it so hard to service them?
Well, it's really interesting. If you think about the consumer space, and I actually started in consumer lending, you have the high levels of automation and high efficiency. I'm not saying that it's all right. There are a lot of categories that are underserved in consumer space, but by and large, the vast majority of people's needs are met. Now we kind of leap over that middle and we land in big business. Well, you've got big revenue for banks, so they can put, bespoke, tailor-made treatment, loan officers and relationship managers and people who make sure that it works really well. Well, one of the problems is when we move into small business, a lot of the complexity that still exists in big business carries directly over, but what you don't have is the big revenue stream. So now you need a mechanism to figure out, how do I make this more efficient? How do I make it actually work? So it's a big problem. If I would try and dimension it for you, it's about $600 billion just in the US. That multiplies by a factor of 4 as we spread it out and beyond. That amounts to about 11 million jobs in the US directly. Indirectly, it's about 35 million jobs. Not to mention the IP loss, so you can begin to get a feel for why it's so important to get this right.
Right, well, women and minorities are certainly overlooked in terms of lending and financial services and the same types of support that are lended to other types of businesses. Why is financial inclusion and supporting these groups important to Uplinq?
Boy, I tell you what, it's a big, big issue. So if you think about it, every small business is challenged because of these kind of problems we've already discussed. But as we look at minority groups, if we look at immigrant populations, if we look at startup businesses, one of the things that's happened is over about the last 30 years, there's been a progressive march by banks to do less and less unsecured lending and more lending that's simply backed by mortgages and real estate, right? Well, if I don't have real estate, which most immigrants don't, a lot of minority groups don't have thick balance sheets. So if I'm not coming to a business with established wealth, I have a problem. So what do we do about it? Well, rather than just relying on a credit report and some financials, and if you're a startup, you don't even have those financials, right? What we actually do is we reach out and we grab about 12 billion pieces of information. We take that data and we identify, what is it that makes you really successful? How resilient are you when times get tough? How creative are you about problem solving? And as we look at the entrepreneur and we look at the business about how they tackle these problems and seize opportunities, we can do some really powerful things that correlate to the success of the business and the success of loan repayment. And that's how we make it happen. We step outside the traditional documents.
Which is so interesting because, I remember when I was a kid in the 80s, there was this commercial that was on all the time. How do I get a job if I don't have the experience to get a job?
It's a catch-22.
And I get it with banks. They're in a business to make money and they're in a business to protect their risk interests.
Absolutely.
So leveraging the newer technologies like we're experiencing at CES, and you were an early pioneer, I guess, in the fintech space, in AI and so forth. So how do you see these newer types of technologies being leveraged in the financial services space to create this access?
Well, I tell you what, it's really important. I mean, if you simply look within Uplinq, we use some of the same math that Einstein used for the general theory of relativity. We use mathematics that John Forbes Nash used for thinking about Nash equilibrium, how we bring parties together to make decisions efficiently. We use AI, we use ML, we use natural language processing. But one of the really important things is if I delivered all that fancy math to somebody, most people, it would just overwhelm them. And so what's really important is that you translate that into what we call a white box solution. A white box solution is one that an underwriter can understand, a board can understand, the regulator can look and say, you know what, people are being treated fairly. This can be used by the bank in a safe and sound way. So when we take these tools, it's important to use this really powerful technology. It's what enables us to do it, but then we also have to translate it back into something that everybody can embrace, and it makes it easy.
Yeah. All right, Pat, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me at CES. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.